Welcome to Act 2 You're On. Join us weekly at our studio roundtable as Rhonda, Kate, and Linda invite spectacular guests to weigh in on staying sexy, vibrant, and healthy. Launch your next great act with authenticity and purpose.
Summon your courage, superstar, and step into the limelight. So grab a coffee
or a martini,
and let's set the stage for a grand entrance. It's Act 2.
You're on.
Greetings, friends. I'm Linda Ty, and I have the great pleasure of podcasting with my two dynamic A2YO co-hosts,
Kate Levy.
I'm Rhonda Garvin-Conaway.
And today, I am thrilled that we get an opportunity to talk with Garey Simmons. I met Garey actually through a platform called Success Circles, which we've also talked about on the podcast. It's an amazing platform, and I am so grateful that I was able to be buddied up with Garey. He's an amazing guy. He's a deep knowledge of the body and health. He has a deep understanding and curiosity about the human spirit and the power of the mind and in regards to our health. So, and I just want to ask our listeners, do you wish you had a better understanding of your body? Would you like to have more energy? Are there some strategies that can help me streamline my understanding of my body and therefore my approach to my health and well-being? Well, this is the conversation for you. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Garey. Garey Simmons, first, is the father of 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls. Through a series of overseas events, he became involved in missions work and traveled to 30 countries in the next 29 years, fulfilling such roles as media and print programming director, organized youth groups, even met with the Mujahideen leaders in Pakistan, eventually teaching English in Shanghai at a European expatriate school and business English at Johnson & Johnson. In the year 2000, upon returning to the U.S., Garey became involved in the telecommunications industry and later started rehabbing houses in Baltimore. In 2005, having received a diagnosis of high risk factors for heart disease and potential stroke, Garey began studying alternative ways to induce good health and mitigate chronic and inherited diseases. By 2006, Garey became fully convinced that high-potency omega-3 fish oil was the first step to reclaiming health. He started a dietary supplement company in 2006 and ran that company until it was sold in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. He remains on the board and helps part-time with operations and marketing. A proponent of the MEDS philosophy and EDS, where mind state, exercise, diet, and sleep are the 4 pillars. By tending to these 4 areas, wellness and vitality can be achieved, reclaimed, and proclaimed. Garey graduated from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition in 2013, completed 1 year of functional medicine study at the Tracy Harrison and the School of Applied Functional Medicine, and recently completed training as a precision nutrition health coach. Garey supports outreach and missions in Nigeria, where there is a lot of need amongst the mothers and infant children with cerebral palsy and other maladies. Currently, Garey spends time visiting his grandchildren and building a self-help website called Full Body Healing, where folks can learn about mind state, exercise, diet, and sleep. So thank you, Garey, so much for being here today. We're so excited to talk with you.
Well, thank you for that.
There's a lot of transitions there. And at A2YO, of course, we're talking about reinventions and transitions. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, being a father of 10 in and of itself has to have an act 2 or 3 in there.
There was 2 marriages, but yeah, I had 4 kids, and then I proceeded to have another 6 kids. But my youngest now, thankfully, I can say with a lot of humility and grace, my youngest is 24 years old, and she holds 2 bachelor degrees, and she got her first job in a mental health and wellness clinic in Montgomery County, Maryland. So I'm very proud of her, proud of that. And I've got kids, Canada, throughout the United States. And the fact that I lived in third world countries most of my adult life, I wasn't exposed to all the, 10,000 varieties of potato chips walking down the aisle in the supermarket. We were lucky to find potato chips anywhere, so I was living a very natural, holistic life in India and China. And when I was on those different mission stations, I studied Ayurvedic medicine in India. And I was treated with Chinese medicine when I was living in China. That was the foundation and the crux of wanting to be more holistic and natural in my life. But I'm also a child of the 1950s. So I grew up eating canned green beans. That was vegetables. They came out of a can. And the whole, I don't know if you want to take the deep dive into food policy in the United States, but anyway, the manufacture of food is directed by government money and subsidies and lobbying. And therefore, it's not always your fault if you're not feeling top of the world and exhibiting your peak potential for who you are as a human being. The body is terrifically magnificent. and capable of so much. And it's very humbling for me to be a student of health and wellness. I'm not a medical doctor. I have studied with medical doctors and nurse practitioners in various wellness courses to talk about wellness and striving and moving towards a better lifestyle is always my favorite thing to talk about. And I can bore people to tears. So believe me.
Oh, not here. I think this is really fascinating. I think it's fascinating to consider that often there's no food in our food anymore because of the way that it's manufactured or what we're putting into our soil. So I think the more light you can help shed on what do we do to stay healthy? I feel like, you try to do the right thing and still you're not feeling like you're at your peak or you're not feeling healthy and you're getting exercise, you're eating the right things, you're trying to at least. I think anything you can offer, well, selfishly, I want to hear, but I know that our listeners are very intrigued by all of this.
Absolutely. Really, what are we as human beings? What are we comprised of? What's the operating system that runs this magnificent computer that we are endowed with and that we have received as a gift? Nobody asked to be landed on this planet. We don't have a choice about that. But once we're here, what do we do with what we got and how do we take care of ourselves? And probably you had Joseph on and he talked about the big why, like, what is your life about? Well, that's a really good question. Quite honestly, everything that I thought meant what my life was supposed to be was sort of taking or downloading from the system and the people around me what they think I should do. But in reality, we are here for a purpose. I believe that. That's just a belief system that I have. Really, everything that happens up here in our mind state controls everything else. So whether you exercise or you don't exercise, whether you eat healthy or you eat junk food, those things are controlled by decisions and belief systems that you've installed. Either you've installed them or probably more often than not, they have been downloaded when you were somewhere between the age of birth and 7 years old. Everything you did in those first 7 years, you were downloading from the outside world, mainly your parents. Hopefully it was mainly your parents or people at school. And that became your belief system until you reached an age of majority and you figured out, I can make decisions for myself. And Dad, I don't really think you're right about that. I'm going to go a different direction. And we do that around the age of 12, 13, or 14 years old. I mean, I know it actually starts at 6 and 7 and 8 years old. I just took care of one of the grandkids recently, and they're teenagers already these days. I don't know if that's the influence of too much screen time or what, but anyway, there is a lot of creative thought going on in a 7-year-old's mind. Back to the question of how do we become healthier now that we are grown adults and we can make our own decisions. I think it's good to just check in with yourself as to who you think you really are and what you think about yourself. Is there a loving relationship between you and you? There's the outside you, this replication of what's on the inside. But what's your treatment? Would you treat your friend the way you treat yourself? Would you talk to friends the way you talk to yourself? Just think about that for a minute. A lot of the negative self-talk, no, you can't do that. No, you're not good enough. No, you're not this or you're not that. That comes from when you were 2 and you were told no 20,000 times. You just can't do that. Sorry, that's not for you. No, don't stick your finger in the socket. No. So we grow up with that emphasis that there are so many things we can't do. And then when we get to this teenage adolescence years and we figure out, hey, I can do some things. Let me try my hand at this. Let me try that. Let me try the next thing. We start seeking and going out in the world. And it's for a very biological reason. We have a family, and that's where we got all this information from. We downloaded all this information, but then we find things we don't agree with. We have to move out to find people that we do agree with, people that we can become sympathetic with, people who will empathize with the things that we're thinking about. And you go out and you start looking for friends, and ultimately you look for a mate and you want to raise a family and start the whole process all over again. I think the treatment of oneself and your mental attitude towards who you are as a person, being willing to say, I really love my life, that's very important to me. I think that I only came to that recognition just a few years ago. I'm here for a purpose and I love my life and I love who I am and I love what I do. If you haven't gotten to the point where you can really be friends with yourself and be in love with who you are and treat yourself with this foundational premise that if you believe in God, we always say God is love. That's a kind of a cliche, but that is really the essence of life. That's what we want to move towards, at least. There are other biomechanisms in our body that make us fear, make us afraid, make us run away. But then the pleasant things and the pleasure of life is moving towards things that are, the kindness, the joy, the happiness, and filling up your heart with those things. I think that's where health really begins. And if you want to talk about practicality things for people who are full-grown adults, we can do that too.
Thank you for talking about those limiting beliefs in the internal work, because I think we can all encounter programs and information ad nauseum, but if we're not addressing the inner work to be in the mindset that we are worthy, and hey, this belief cuts in my way and is a block, then it's going to continue to feel really challenging. So I segue into talking about this pragmatic approach. I understand you have a philosophy. It's a great acronym, I believe, MEDS. And if you could share with us what that represents and how it works, I think we could all benefit to hear about the granular and how to put it into action.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So we all need tools to do jobs, to do work, to get things accomplished. You need a tool. MEDS is a tool. It gives you a focus, a focal point. And generally, we can handle 2 or 3 or 4 things to focus on at a time in order to achieve a result. So I used to say mind state was 80% of life and 80% of health. But now I've reformed, and I believe that mind state is 100% of everything. It's a kind of a Buddhist concept that what you believe is the creation around you. You project what you want in life, and what comes to you comes from you. It's a cycle. It's the same thing as what happens in the body itself, where mind state, we can call it a pillar. Exercise, we can call it a pillar. Diet, we can call it a pillar, and sleep. But all those things are totally integrated and holistic together. You can't separate one without the other. You can't be sleeping really well at night while you're mad and upset and bitter at the government, the IRS, your mate, your kids. That just doesn't work. You're not going to get good sleep if you're upset with life. If once you get the mind state piece, and there's a lot of tools when you go to Full Body Healing, I have a free course there. It does require a sign up, but you can access about 10 or 11 lessons that deal with mind state, exercise, diet, and sleep.
I would like to talk about Western meds and this notion that we have a pill to solve every
pill
problem.
For every ill.
But often we're addressing the symptom rather than the cause. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your stance on synthetic medicines versus food as medicine.
Great question. So Hippocrates is credited for saying, let food be thy medicine and medicine thy food. We've heard that. That's, I guess, 3,000 years ago. But in clinical science, this Western allopathic way of dealing with disease, really clinical studies were only started in 2003, or published, I should say. In the 1990s, when doctors went to medical school, there was no nutrition. There was no concept of talking about food. And in fact, to even underline it and put an exclamation point on it, doctors have the worst lifestyle. They go from their 4 years of medical school into an internship and a residency, and they're on 12-hour shifts. And what are they eating when they get a 5-minute break? They're eating pizza. They're eating fast-moving carbs that are going to give them the energy to keep going at that moment, but it also creates all this cortisol and stress, and they're living off of epinephrine and adrenaline. And then when they're off duty, they have to sleep and they get up and start the whole cycle again. So when it comes to pharmaceutical drugs, now, I was pretty adamantly against all pharmaceutical drugs for most of my life. I think I was given a penicillin type pill when I was in India. I had a blind boil on my arm that just would not, tried all the natural remedies, couldn't get that thing to pop and go away. So I went to a doctor to have it lanced. He gave me an antibiotic just in case. And that pill turned me beet red from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. Like I had this really adverse reaction to penicillin. I swore off pharmaceutical drugs. No, I'm good, And as I said, where I was living, it's equivalent of what we call farmers markets here, open air markets, where you go get your fresh food and vegetables and meats and cheese if you're so lucky. That's how I live. That's the way I prefer to live. Now, when it comes to medicine of chronic diseases, that we have the four horsemen, right? We've got heart disease, we've got cancer, we've got diabetes, and we've got neurodegenerative diseases. Those four chronic illnesses, basically my belief is that they come from lifestyle and diet. Either poor diet or poor lifestyle leads to these certain outcomes for people. There's some little bit of genetics involved, but underlying most of this really is the diabetes question. From diabetes, heart disease, neurodegenerative disease, and cancer is formed from insulin resistance and too much glucose in the blood, and there's no uptake for the glucose. And then the fat becomes this extra almost organ that has to be dealt with by the body. And our system, historically and prehistorically, we're not fit for that. We're not fit to be living that type of a lifestyle. I have reformed a bit to the extent that if you are in a crisis and you are in deep trouble and you're one step away from emergency, go ahead and take the medicine if the doctor says this is going to save your life and get you out of trouble. But I'm not really in favor of treating chronic disease only with medicine. I mean, I know this was taught to doctors to have first-line therapy. That means lose some weight and eat better. Okay, the lesson's over. That's all you're going to get, right? In that vein, they're going to prescribe that pill for every ill and then send you to a specialist. Unless they go out and study functional medicine or holistic medicine, or I've met medical doctors who have delved into all the other different art forms from Chinese medicine, acupuncture. But, I spent a year studying functional medicine and I really love it. And that's where I had to taper off this idea that all synthetic medicine is bad. Well, it is if you're trying to live off of it. But if you're trying to get out of a really dire emergency situations, do what your doctor says.
If your house is burning down, you're going to call the fire department, not the restoration company. But if you're trying to take care of your house and prevent fires, you're going to call the restoration company to come in and make sure that your house is in good shape.
You want to keep your house up to code. That's exactly right. That's right.
Yes. Keep your house up to code. Yes. Yeah. And I know we're getting close in our time, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the mindset piece. I totally agree. I also study at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. So, they talk about primary food and secondary food, and primary food is your emotional state and how you treat yourself and how you love yourself. But that's not so easy to do. But those little voices in my head are still there. And the tracks that I've learned throughout my whole life are still there. And quick sort of thought on, is there a good way to shift? Do you have some sort of practical way to shift in the day when you start to notice that you're doing that?
I'm a practitioner of using brain waves to adjust my thinking. And let me preface it by saying that there are molecules in your body that make you feel good and want to get out there and accomplish things. And there are molecules in your body that make you feel depressed and want to go to bed and never get up again. It is biological. It's, which came first, the chicken or the egg, and that's where hopefully if you start with mind state and realize a few things and make a few declarations about who you are and what you believe in and what you want for your life, you can build on that. That becomes foundational and you can build on that. Dr. Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief is his cornerstone work. He taught me that the first 5 minutes when I wake up in the morning and the last 5 minutes before I go to sleep, you're entering the brainwave of theta. Theta is self-hypnosis. Theta is the imaginary playground that 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old is playing in, making tea for people who are not there, and creating and doing all this wonderful stuff. That is theta. Theta is a slower brainwave than we're operating right now at beta. That's our normal functioning conscious mind. But if you want to get in touch with your body, and you want to get in touch with your subconscious mind, use theta. And theta is that 5 minutes before you're falling asleep. And that 5 minutes when you're first waking up before you open your eyes. This is also a Buddhist thing to do. The way a Buddhist monk will wake up is not to open his eyes first thing. You ruminate and you think and you let the mind do what it's doing. And generally, I postulate those in the evening before I'm going to sleep. I give it to God or give it to the universe. I've worked on it. I can't figure anything out. It's befuddling. Well, if you put that in your theta brain, the theta brain waves, and let the subconscious work on it, a lot of times the next morning or the morning after, there will be some clarity and there will be a new way of looking at it, a new idea. And I think that's probably one of the best places to start is just, we're talking about 10 minutes a day and you're going to be in bed anyway, doing something, trying to get to sleep. Well, make it a practice to affirm yourself, make it a practice. That's how I lost 30 pounds. I was consider being a health coach and being 30, 35 pounds overweight and having gout flare-ups and being prescribed medication that I wouldn't take. How I solved this, Well, I tried drinking more water. I tried, a lot of different physical things. But when I decided that at 186 pounds that I wanted to be 179, I just told myself as I was going to sleep and as I was waking up, 179. 179, 179. I kept repeating it for about 2 weeks. And then with everything else I was doing in my life and the studying of autophagy and various methodologies, how the body works, understanding what's really going on, I felt like I was connecting with my subconscious and the weight just dropped. And I got down to, the BMI magical goal weight. Further than that, I've lost more weight by getting a little more active. And one of the things I currently do, but I get up in the morning and I go for a walk. These eyes are actually, we call them eyes. We think they're connected to our brain. But in fact, these cells in the eyes are actually part of your brain. Just think about that. You've got your brain sticking outside your skull. And what's that for? It's to regulate the environment and to understand what's going on around you so the central nervous system can keep track of everything, all the organs operating at a certain time. The circadian rhythm is nothing to be trifled with. You want to get sunlight or even clouds. Cloudy sky is fine. You're getting photons from the sun. And that's activating that circadian rhythm clock, that sits just above the roof of your mouth. And that is the supervising clock that affects all other clocks in your body. Your liver has a clock. Your heart has a clock. Your spleen. Every part of your body has a pulse and a clock that organizes the work that part of your body needs to do. And it does it holistically and synergistically. So lowering the inside lights in the evening, having fresh air and sun in the morning, that's another great place to start building a new functioning way to improve your health.
I know that you're doing work in Nigeria, and I know this is a much larger discussion, but I think it's regarding vitamins and supplements. And I don't know if there's something that you can offer to our listeners and to me that we should be taking that is, helpful to be working at our best.
Well, obviously, as Linda well knows, the nutritional piece of what you eat and how you believe in what you eat is important. Certainly within our society today, there's going to be gaps. We're going to be missing things. And while naysayers will say, well, that you're just making expensive pee-pee, like taking these supplements and that's not quite true. We do want to get as much of our vitamins and our minerals from the food we eat. And as you pointed out at the beginning, the apples that we eat today are not the apples that our grandmothers ate. And the same is true for wheat, especially for wheat. With that said, we know everybody is in agreement, vitamin C and vitamin D, right? With this pandemic that's ongoing, like we have to take care of ourselves. There's a great quote from Dr. Andrew Weil. He says, you cannot count on the medical system to keep you healthy. The medical system doesn't even get involved until you're really, really sick. You can't see a doctor until you get an appointment, which might be 3 weeks from now. What are you going to do for yourself in the meantime? I'm a big proponent of vitamin C and vitamin D. I want to get my vitamin D from the sun, but I do also take it as a supplement. I feel very strongly about the immune system. And there's a lot we could talk about the immune system. But yeah, that's really important. And then omega-3 fish oil. That's the cornerstone of, not everybody likes fish. And unfortunately, the fish that are in the ocean, the larger fish, they've been out there for a while and they've encountered pollutants and carcinogens and all sorts of nasty things that we wouldn't want to put in our bodies. If I were to recommend, I was quite surprised to learn this myself, but farm-raised salmon actually has more omega-3 than ocean-caught salmon. But certainly salmon, once or twice a week, and any other kind of seafood that you enjoy, as long as it's deemed safe. And then supplement with omega-3s. They come in nice little shiny capsules, and they're easy to take. And it's, if nothing else, it's an insurance policy because it's got this anti-inflammatory effect, and most of the chronic diseases come from inflammation.
And so, Garey, we're going to shift into the golden nugget segment. So that's a little bit of information or a thought that you might have that will help our listeners as they're at a point of transition or reinvention. So
I think the nugget is to really be in touch with where you are right now. And that little key at the beginning I shared, I think that's really my nugget, is really respect who you are and love yourself and just treat yourself the way you would treat any of your friends and your loved ones, right? You wouldn't be mean or snarky or doing put downs all the time. So my mission and my big why is to just fill up my heart with all those good things, happiness and joy, and transmute those things into health, right? I want to be healthy. I want to live a long time. And I want people my age, especially, to take better care of themselves. You can't wait for the medical system to invent something that's going to heal you. Prevention is better than cure. More money spent on prevention and eating well. Like here's a little tip too. Sorry, you're gonna have to shut me up.
No. I'm writing it down.
My key to losing weight was autophagy, AUTOPHAGY. It means self-eating, right? You're eating yourself. It's the recycling of cells in your body is prompted and sparked by intermittent fasting. So eating less, calorie restriction allows me, I don't have to get this massive amount of food to satisfy my body. I just need a few really good things. So I'm willing to spend more money on higher quality food and eat less of it and be healthy and be happy.
Oh, there's so much. I love this conversation. Thank you. And unfortunately, we are going to begin to wrap it up. I have the task of saying, it's that time. So before we put an end to this amazing dialogue, could you share with us what's next for you?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Grandpa is the key word here. My grandkids are spread around the United States. And for the last 2 years, no traveling. My journey the rest of this year is to see more of my grandkids. I've got some on the West Coast I've never met, and there's a couple in Wisconsin that are going to come down to the East Coast. That's really big for me. Family is really number one. I've achieved what I wanted to achieve with finances and money and that kind of thing, business. I think it's really important to be motivated to do all those things. But at this point in my life, I really want to enjoy my grandkids and impart and make it easier for my grandkids' parents, my kids, to have an easier time. So that's really what's next for me. With fullbodyhealing.com, that is the venue where I'll be posting. There's 150 blog posts up already, and you don't need to log in to read those. The classes that are 10 or 15 lessons each, those will be coming out. There's about 6 of them in the works, so you can partake and enjoy that. And it's all for free. At some point, we will start charging money, and then that money is going to help support the clinic in Nigeria.
Which is very good and important work.
Absolutely.
Having met Dr. David, we can vouch for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Garey is one of my favorite people in the world. I'm really so glad I met him. I'm so glad to have this conversation. And thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, ladies. I appreciate it very much, and keep up the good work.
And folks, just to reiterate, you can find out more about Garey at fullbodyhealing.com and also about the supplements and vitamins at thevitaminspa.com.
And so it is left to me to say, go forth, be brave, live well, and do good, because it is Act 2. You're on.
Act 2 You're On was brought to you by Act 2 Share Our Stage.
You can find us at a2yo.com and also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please listen and subscribe wherever you find your podcast. You can support us using Patreon. Thanks for listening.